Welcome to the first episode of In Perspective, a new series that will take an in-depth look at the prevailing challenges the Associated and its network of agencies are facing in our world today. I'm your host and proud chair of the board, Beth Goldsmith, and I'm delighted that you'll be joining me today. Over the next 8 months, this series will provide an opportunity to speak with local and national experts about the global issues facing our world, from the environment to aging to anti-Semitism. During these intimate conversations, we will look at how the Associated and its network of agencies, thanks to the support of the annual campaign, is getting ahead of the curve to address the issues in innovative and forward-thinking ways. Today, we're kicking off our program with my friend and counterpart, Marc B. Terrill, president of the Associated. Following a difficult year and a half, shaped by a global pandemic, spikes in anti-Semitism, and a changing Jewish community, Marc is here to discuss where we've been, what we've done, and how we're moving forward in this age of uncertainty. We welcome your questions. Please submit them to the Zoom chat. We'll have time to address a few questions with Marc toward the end of the program. Let's take a look at where we are now.
This past year, we've learned many important lessons. Our family and friends matter. Technology helps us connect. Science can do amazing things. But none of us are immune from loneliness, from hardship, or from loss. We can't get through this struggle alone. We need each other. The Associated is here to help our neighbors reconnect and find joy. We're here to lend a hand, delivering a hot meal, and making sure Bubby is comfortable in her home. We're here to stand up against inequity and hate, creating a just and safe world. We're here to uplift Jews everywhere, building connections and strengthening bonds, one heart at a time. We're here to invest in camps and classrooms, planting for the next generation. For 100 years and counting, our Jewish values compel us to tackle the problems of the day and face the future with strength and resolve. Because of you, we can accomplish the extraordinary. We are strong because you care. We are here because you give. The Associated is here for those in need, for justice, for Jews around the world, and for a brighter tomorrow. Together, we are here for good.
Before we get started, today is the 3rd anniversary of the massacre at the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh. I want to take a moment to remember the victims. Marc, I know you have a personal connection.
Yes, Beth. It goes under the heading of you have to feel blessed for every day that you're with your loved ones and that you have a quality of life and experience and health. On that particular day, my wife and I were traveling on an Associated mission overseas, and we received a call from my wife's mother, my mother-in-law, that 2 of Diana, my wife's cousins, were killed during the massacre. And from that day forward, life changed as we knew it. So 11 souls taken from us for no other reason than they were Jewish.
It's a day we'll never forget, and unfortunately there have been too many other similar incidents. So let's bring things back to home. You and I speak at least once a day, but today we're actually getting to sit COVID separated, but in the same place at the same time, and it's really wonderful to be able to have this conversation.
To be with you in person.
It is, but you look great.
Thank you, you too.
Thank you. Right before the COVID began, actually well before the COVID began, you speak about the Associated as a network, as opposed to the Associated as singular. Why? And why is this relevant to our viewers?
Well, it's interesting that you caught that nuance, and that's very intentional. I think the reason that I've been speaking about the network is that that's what is helping people. That's what individual donors are supporting. It's not one particular agency, it's a portfolio of agencies, if you will. So we have 12 local agencies, 6 operating programs, and they all have a very distinctive role. So names that you're familiar with and viewers are familiar with. Shemish for kids who have learning differences. The J for people that are seeking out engagement in health and wellness. The Center for Jewish Education, that is a force behind educational pursuits for our community. And then you have the Associated, which is responsible for resource development and deployment and asset management. So we all have our distinctive role, but it's the network, it's the power of the network working together and making sure there is an effective marshaling of assets. One associated network.
Thanks. Great description. I love to hear you put it all together like that. Now, every community claims to be unique. What are some of the distinguishing factors which make the Associated Network truly different from communal approaches in other communities?
So every community will claim to be unique based on geography and population or whatever it might be. There are a ton of similarities. But one very distinctive feature of the Associated Network in Baltimore is the level of collaboration that we have and the integration that we have. So I'll give I guess, 3 poignant examples of how that plays out. So in 2008, when we're on the verge of a financial abyss, when a bubble bursts and people are really feeling financial despair, we were able to pull together all our agencies to essentially have a war room of how we address the issues of the day. What we needed to do immediately, what we could sunset for a period of time, and have an integrated plan for doing so. In other communities where all those agencies are essentially competing for attention and donor interest, and they're not planning together, they don't have that feature and that quality of community of integration like we do. 2 other very brief examples. I talked about '08. COVID hits, March of 2020, and we didn't know what the COVID virus was. We thought it was something akin to the common cold. We spoke to our partners at LifeBridge and Sinai. We understood that this was something different. We convened all our agencies and we came up with a plan of action. And the last piece is, obviously there's been spikes in anti-Semitism and in hate speech and needs for the Jewish community to be mindful of security. We do that as a community. Again, as the Associated Network, a feature of what people are supporting and how we operate is leveraging resources and making sure that we're working in lockstep and synergy.
Let me take that one step further. You mentioned COVID. Clearly, we have been through the last 18 months of uncertainty and ups and downs in our community. What would you say are some of our greatest accomplishments and, I guess, the challenges that lay ahead?
So in terms of the greatest accomplishments, I think it was, and I'm not cavalier when I say this, is the resolve of the professional staffs of our agencies and throughout the network and of the lay leadership. It was another distinguishing factor. It wasn't like, oh my goodness, what are we going to do? It was, we have this confronting us and we have to respond. The other thing that I'm particularly proud of is that we had a coherent plan that responded to how we communicate with constituencies, with our constituency, how people access service, dampening wait times for people to receive triage services, working together in order to make sure that everything that needed to be tended to as best as we could was responded to in a timely way. So I think that that was a particular important accomplishment, and that we had a communication channel where we could refine the plan based on data that was coming in and changing so quickly. So that was, I think, a really important aspect that remains to this day. The other thing that I'm particularly proud of is that people understood that you could not stand on the sidelines during this time, that you had to be responsive to this thing we call community, and taking care of people, because if not for the grace of God, it could be you, and it could be your neighbors, and in some cases it was your neighbors. So we banded together and we responded. And I would say we're not out of the woods yet. We still have a very tall order to fill. And things that I regret is the fact that during this time that we couldn't be proximate, that we couldn't engage the way that we typically have engaged, of being in rooms and meeting, or serving people that need therapeutic services and doing that we relied on virtual. And it was a blessing of 3 years ago, before the pandemic. We didn't know that there was going to be a pandemic, but we knew we had to up our game in terms of virtual capability and technology and cybersecurity and all those things, which was already in place. That was a blessing.
That was a great part of our plan, I know. And we were talking mostly about our local community, but could you speak a little bit to our impact and the impact of the pandemic and our relationship with our overseas partners as well?
Yeah, so I guess if I had to use a metaphor of how we responded, wherever there was a fire, we ran to the fire and we tried to extinguish that fire. If it was local and we had issues of financial insecurity or mental health challenges or combating isolation or whatever, we were responding as a system. Overseas, there are different aspects of world Jewry that are counting on us. And that might sound like hubris, but it's not. When in the former Soviet Union, there are 110,000 Holocaust survivors that are living across 11 time zones. They don't have a government that cares about them. They have the world Jewish community and the federation system to make sure they have medicine, to make sure they have a roof over their head, that they're cared for, and quite frankly, they can die in dignity. The other aspects overseas, for example, there's been a lot of aliyah to Israel, moving to Israel, in places, that are it's aliyah by choice, but in many respects, these individuals are under duress. Places like Venezuela, Brazil, France, Ethiopia, where circumstances are not great for the Jewish community. And it's our dollars that help, in conjunction with the Israeli government, to move these individuals to safe haven. So those types of things that go beyond the Baltimore borders, we still have a sacred responsibility to respond to. So I hope that answers your question.
It was a great answer, and I'm going to give you even more leeway here. For those people who are watching who still haven't heard enough to persuade them, they might need a bit more information to give us gifts of both their time and their treasure. What else would you say to convince them?
Well, I think because we are a large organization that has a sacred responsibility, but we're also very mindful of systems and dampening competition and maximizing resources. So we operate as a business, but a business with a very benevolent and important purpose. So hopefully it has resonance of how we operate in terms of integration and centrality, that we're maximizing resources, whether that's donor funds or that's agencies working together to tackle a problem, whether it's anti-Semitism or it's services to youth and teens, or it's making sure that our elderly population is taken care of. So that's one aspect. The other aspect is, and what I think is a differentiating feature, is in this community, when there are people that need the extended hand of a caring community, they turn to our system. Now, we have a very strong synagogue community, we have a very strong community in general, but there are certain things that, if not for the grace of God, as I said before, it could be us. So when you look at the person who lost their job, that could be you. When you look at the people that need subsidy to send their kids to school and have Jewish experiences, that could be you. It may be you. So again, I don't think anybody has the benefit of sitting on the sidelines. Everybody needs to participate, in particular during a time that is so fragile, that is so intense as what we're experiencing now with COVID and other things that are going on in the world.
You just always say that so beautifully, so movingly. I also want to talk about the associated, we call ourselves the convener. You've worked particularly hard to pull together various organizations, groups, and individuals to work together, to collaborate. Talk a little about how that works.
Excuse me. So again, we endeavored a few years back, which I think was an important strategic decision. The Associated doesn't have to own every program and aspect and agency. There are certain things that we're well suited to collaborate. So for example, related to COVID, we built a coalition with our friends at LifeBridge and Sinai. We built a coalition with different transportation entities that needed to make sure that people can be transported to doctor's appointments. We built coalitions across our city and our community in order to be responsive. We're related to security. Once again, the synagogues, Jewish organizations that are not connected to the Associated, a number of different entities, we built a coalition to respond to security. Similarly, on response to anti-Semitism. Similarly to how to navigate federal policies in accessing the PPP program. We had a private briefing with community leaders, with Senator Cardin and bankers and other individuals that helped us to navigate the process when it was very unclear. We did that as a community. It wasn't just the associated agencies. We invited everybody in because that's the way we work in Baltimore, of working in a collaborative way.
Yeah, great. I mean, of course, all ships rise with the tide, we say, but I always like to say that a healthy Jewish community needs to be part of a broader, healthy community. So, of course, we need to participate with everyone. So, this is a question I think about every day, every time I talk to you. With so many issues confronting us, how do you navigate multiple priorities?
Well, fortunately, we have an entire team of practitioners, of leaders, of clergy, of important resources to help us navigate that aspect. We pay a lot of heed to data in making our assessments, and we also understand that what may be important to one person may not be as important to the other, and vice versa. So everything becomes somewhat of a priority, and our ability to raise more money to put at and advocate for resources gives us the ability to pursue those different aspects with rigor and with depth and with breadth. So we it's like everything. It's managing multiple priorities, because you can't say to somebody that a school subsidy is not important, or that taking care of the earth is not important, or security is not important. So how do you rank those? You address them as best you can, and that's why we're always out there pleading the case for participation. But data is a very important aspect of what we do, and addressing the best we can given the circumstances.
So what keeps you up at night?
So the things that keep me up at night, and I've thought quite a bit about this, and you have as well. We've discussed this. So one thing is people and their ability or lack thereof to have civil discourse and to appreciate opinions that might not be theirs, and be able to hold on to that and live with that. Compromise is another thing. Another thing is, and I feel deeply about this, and many of our agencies address this, I think we have a precious legacy and an incredible benefit of being Jewish and being involved in Judaism and Jewish thought and Jewish thinking. I think that many people have gotten so comfortable with not necessarily concerned about particular identity that they lose this incredible gift of how to really bring important meaning to your life. So I worry about that. I worry about people feeling like it's something that they're obligated to do, or there's so much beauty in what we have as a community. Other thing I think about is when you talk about precious aspects of Jewish life is Israel. Israel's not perfect, but I think it's a pretty inspired country that has challenges. So we need to understand Israel better. We need to understand the nuances. We need to help it grow. It's still a little over 70 years young, and so I worry about that, and I worry about just people maybe being apathetic or myopic and just focused in on self. And I think with all the things we have going on in the world, we can't afford that. So I know that's a lot, and I know it's probably pretty heavy, but it's stuff that we all have to be concerned about. Nobody, back to my point, has the benefit of remaining on the sideline.
No, I agree very wholeheartely. It's what keeps us working so hard all day long. Maybe I don't stay up at night because I've been working on it all day long, as have you, of course. So, are there some imminent changes on the horizon that our viewers might want to learn about? So we some things that I think it would be interesting for viewers to know. So, right before COVID, we were involved with multi-year planning for the centennial of the Associated. In 1920, people got together and they said we're stronger together than we are in separate entities, and the Associated was birthed, or the forerunner to the Associated. So over 100 years, we've dealt with multiple issues, and as we were evaluating at the time, now in 2018, what it was going to be like to be a community in 2020 and beyond, we made some assessments, and we looked at data, we created plans, and certain programs are in place right now because of the thinking then. An example is the Inside Israel Forum. We were of the mind that there wasn't a great deal of Israel-based education. There was great Israel advocacy in Baltimore, but people, if you knew what the Balfour Declaration was, or the Green Line, or some of the nuances, you were already at an advanced degree level. So we birthed this thing called the Inside Israel Forum, and now we have thousands of people who are understanding more of the nuances. We have something called Na'aleh, which is the hub for Jewish leadership and learning. That too came out of data collection, dreaming about things that we needed to have in this community. So during COVID, we started to make some other assessments, and some were COVID related, like physical spaces, and do we need a lot of real estate in the Jewish community? Now, certainly we need to have places to congregate like the Jewish Community Center, and places for therapeutic services like Jewish Community Services.
But we made a decision that one of our campuses, actually the one we're sitting in right now, 101 West Mount Royal, the Associated headquarters, that we could possibly sell this location and move the Associated to another location. And we've got lay leaders and professionals that are working on where that may be and what that might be. And with the condition that the headquarters of the Associated remain in the city of Baltimore. So right now there are different committees that are looking at where the Associated headquarters could go and looking at a possible sale, and because to run facilities costs money. So, and as we go through COVID, I think hybrid workforces are going to be a thing that's going to be here for quite some time. The other thing is that we've looked at the whole space of Jewish education and engagement. And in particular, those things that happen out in the community that are kind of like, not organic, they're organized, but they're not happening necessarily at the JCC, and how we manage those different experiences. So something that I think is an important component of this, and the Center for Jewish Education, we're looking to have an entity that focuses on formal Jewish education, because that's a skill set and an orientation in and of itself, and an other that looks at engagement opportunities that are not formal in nature. They're informal, things that will immerse people in the environment through a Jewish lens, or learning about Israel, whatever it might be. The feature of this new organization, though, will manage for the next Jewish opportunity for individuals and families. So what I mean by this is, when we have a myriad of different programs, maybe people come to a second and a third one, maybe they don't. I hope they do. But in this new management system and way of looking at Jewish engagement, we're going to manage for that next important encounter, like joining a synagogue, or being active in Jewish learning, or going to Israel, or getting on a committee, or whatever it might be. So those are two things that I think are kind of like on the horizon and are in motion. Physical spaces, and also how we manage Jewish education and experientials.
I like to call it thinking outside the box and outside the building.
Okay.
That's the future.
Yeah.
When you do public speaking, you speak a great deal about gratitude. Tell me why and what that means to you.
Well, how can we not be grateful for, first of all, as a communal professional who has elected to do this 24/6 or 24/7, I work with the most incredible colleagues and practitioners in the country. By extension, lay leaders like yourself and others who are not looking for in-name only type of opportunities, but are putting their seichel, their resources into motion as we endeavor in community. And the other thing is that we have a community that continues to step up, whether it's COVID, or it's the '08 bubble, or it's, God forbid, war in Israel, or it's domestic unrest, or it's security, or we have a community that I think is incredibly special. And I now hopefully can consider myself a Baltimorean. My connection here is over 30 years. All 3 kids born here, and all that kind of good stuff. But I've had the...
And my connection is over 65 years, but I wasn't born here, so I'm still not quite a Baltimorean.
Well, as chair of the board and hopefully as president of the Associated, we get a little bit of a pass.
Okay.
But
we get our honorary membership.
I've seen other communities in action, and if you speak to anybody that's involved in the Associated Network that goes to a national conference, they say when they speak about being from Baltimore, there is a different degree of respect and seriousness, and that is earned, and we are just the guardians of this. This has gone on for quite some time, and we're just blessed to have a very responsive and educated and enlightened and activist community. And why not have gratitude? That's incredible.
Yes, it is. It is indeed. Well, we have some questions from the viewers. This is about our youth's involvement in Jewish life, which has been rapidly changing over the years, and what are we doing to keep young adults engaged in Jewish life?
Well, I think some of it is obviously it's individual responsibility and modeling for our children. So that's one thing. Institutionally, what we're doing, and I have to give incredible kudos to the synagogue community that's rethinking the way that they're engaging young children and teens in making Jewish life and Judaism and Jewish thought and connection meaningful. So I think first and foremost, the synagogue community is so critically important. By extension, having the experientials that we talked about, whether it's the Diller program or Forefront for teens that's at the JCC, or a myriad of experientials that meets essentially the kids where they're at, that doesn't shove information down their throats and make it not that appealing to be connected. I think we have an incredible product, and we have to be able to sell it to them and engage them on their terms. And I think the community, synagogues, the Associated Network, has matured to understand that it's not one size fits all, and it's not you do it this way or there's no way. We have to evolve, and we have to kind of know our customer.
Yeah, that's so true. Here's another question from our crowd. Can you expand on the Associated's relationship with Baltimore and the general community?
So we are back to the whole notion of coalitions. We're connected, me individually as the president of the Associated, and lay leaders as representatives of the Associated, in a number of different initiatives. And some that are formal in nature, and some that are informal, of attacking issues that that matter to the people of Baltimore. We have a long history in Baltimore. We are of Baltimore. Baltimore is our home, and we have these different coalitions in order to address different issues. So the issues, they're on safety, they're on education, they're on economic empowerment, job force development, a myriad of things. But people can be proud of the fact that the Jewish community is represented in very strong ways across the landscape in the Baltimore region.
I know personally from just attending board of directors meetings at the Associated, we've had the mayor, we've had county councilmen, we have people representing Hopkins, Goucher, the universities in the area as well. So I think we really try and make ourselves available to the whole community and reach out to the community. Also, the help that we give when it's needed, anything from our Jewish Volunteer Connection, which does a lot of work throughout the city, and Mitzvah Day. There are many times when we go beyond our community to be a part of it, and certainly encourage everyone in the Jewish community to also do that. As
you say, all ships rise with the tide. If we're mindful of strengthening the whole ecosystem of Baltimore and helping different organizations build capacity, helping different organizations learn from our leadership development techniques, it's good for Baltimore, and therefore we want to be behind that.
I mentioned Goucher and Hopkins, and there are certainly other colleges we're involved with, so I think this is the last question that we have time for. How are we working with area colleges to make sure the campuses feel safe for Jewish students?
So we have Hillel presence on each of the campuses, and those individuals, professionals and volunteer leaders, act as kind of like very important players in this equation of working with different universities on different issues that are particular to that university and that student population. Included in that is security, and we have a director of security at the Associated that interfaces with local police forces. I have to tell you, the public officials and police forces, Baltimore County, Baltimore City, Anne Arundel County, down at College Park, have been incredible. So we work on prevention, we work on relationship development, we work on a myriad of things using the Hillels as kind of our outpost and important players, and again, very important organizations, but we have things coming up all the time that could threaten the Jewish population. There was something recently at one of our universities that was anti-Israel and made students feel very uncomfortable. And this director and the lay leadership were very quick to respond. The university responded, and so we're both proactive, but unfortunately many times we have to be reactive because things just happen.
I know the support that we offer is great, not only financial. I'm a Goucher grad and was on their Hillel board for a while, and so I know how closely we worked with the Associated, even in planning, that there was this outreach to the Hillel. So I know how deeply we do try and be involved and be in a supporting role.
Well, it makes great practical sense, and in terms of philosophy, you know, when we attack an issue and when we put human and financial resources behind it, we have an obligation to make sure that it's first rate and that we're actually doing what we're setting out to accomplish. So the way that you do that is through collaboration. Again, that's the strength of a network.
It's a great last word, but I'm going to offer you the opportunity for any other last words if there's anything you want to say that we haven't touched on before we wrap up.
I think we covered a good amount of territory, but what I guess in close, what I will say is, and this has been said, but I've seen it so many times during COVID, we are so interconnected, and our health and wellness, and I'm not necessarily talking about COVID, is so intertwined, and our security and our future and our joy and our celebrations, that community doesn't happen by osmosis. It happens because people care to be part of it, and I'm just inviting everybody to be part of it, wherever they feel like they fit.
And I certainly hope everybody takes Marc up on that invitation. Thank you, Marc. I'm sure I'll talk to you later today.
Sure. Thank you.
So thanks to Marc, and thanks to all of you sitting in on this call, because without your ongoing commitment and support, we couldn't be doing the things we've been doing to keep our community strong. Before you go, I want to let you know about the Associated Super Sunday, Baltimore's largest fundraising day. This year, for the first time ever, we are broadcasting a Give for Good telethon. Please tune in and sing along with Tony-nominated Broadway stars from Rent, Wicked, Dear Evan Hansen, and more. Or cook with Israeli chef and best-selling cookbook author Adina Sussman. Be inspired by local talent from the Baltimore Symphony Orchestra and the Chesapeake Shakespeare Company. The list of talent just keeps going, and it's something you just won't want to miss. So please register today at associated.org/Super Sunday. And join us next month on November 22nd at noon as we welcome Yakir Manella, CEO of Ozone and Pearlstone. Yakir will have just returned from the United Nations Climate Change Conference in Scotland. We're very excited to hear firsthand about what they talked about, the recent Ozone-Pearlstone merger, and how the Associated is addressing environmental issues with a focus on a Jewish lens. And finally, I want to remind all of you about the importance, as you've heard today, of our annual campaign and how every donation makes a difference. please consider making a gift today at associated.org/give or call 410-369-9300. And thank you for joining us. And until next month, stay well.